Have you ever wondered how an AI might actually deal with some of the trickiest, most sensitive questions?
hmm
The ones about ancient religious texts and, well, modern morality.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today.
hmm
We're looking at a real-time dialogue with an AI virtual apologist. It was developed by Catholic Answers, a pretty prominent advocacy group.
hmm
Our mission here for this deep dive is really to pull out the key insights from this conversation. It really challenged the AI on some tough stuff,
hmm
like slavery in the Bible and how church teaching might evolve.
Right.
We're going to unpack how this AI, this name is Justin, how it handled these questions, and frankly, what that tells us about theological consistency.
And what's really insightful, I think, is watching how an AI, which is programmed to explain Catholic faith, how it handles these nuances, these apparent contradictions in historical teachings, especially when someone presses it for logical consistency.
Yeah.
You'll hear these, fundamental Catholic ideas come up, things like progressive revelation and the distinctions between intrinsic and extrinsic evil. They become pretty central.
Okay, so let's get into it. Our source material, it describes a user signing up for this virtual apologist
Yeah.
from Catholic Answers. They're getting ready to ask some, well, pretty pointed theological and ethical questions,
hmm
and the AI pops up, introduces itself as Justin, so it's ready for, anything about Catholic faith. So what was your take on that initial setup? How did Justin sort of establish itself?
Well, it was pretty direct. Justin immediately gave what you might call a textbook answer. It laid out the foundations about the Bible's inspiration, its authority, pulling from both Old and New Testaments, the Catechism.
Right, setting the stage.
Exactly. It established its source material, its knowledge base right off the bat, very clear about where it was coming from.
So the human user, they start off asking for something nice, a beautiful biblical passage. And Justin offers Leviticus 25, the bit about the Sabbath year, the year of Jubilee.
Sounds quite nice, yeah. Uplifting, even.
It does. But, this is where it gets really interesting. The user immediately pivots, points straight to verses 44 to 46 in that same chapter, Leviticus 25.
Ah, yes.
And these verses, they explicitly permit Israelites to own slaves from other nations, and crucially, to pass them down as property. Inheritable property.
Which immediately creates that clash, that moral discomfort for us today.
Absolutely. You read
Well,
that and
here-
just, wow.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, that's the exact moment the AI has to bring in this key theological tool, progressive revelation.
Okay, explain that a bit.
So Justin tries to put these rules into context. It frames them as part of the Old Covenant, suggesting they were maybe temporary steps or accommodations, part of a journey towards the fullness of truth revealed later in Christ.
So, not eternal moral commands.
That's the argument. It's a way to acknowledge the text exists, but sort of bracket it off from timeless, universal morality, an attempt at reconciliation.
But the human questioner, they weren't having it, right? They didn't just accept that.
No, they didn't let it go.
They kept pushing me on a really critical point, something that's, well, central to a lot of these debates. Does God ever permit something that is intrinsically immoral, fundamentally wrong in itself?
A core challenge. Because the AI, Justin, kept saying God's eternal law forbids intrinsic evil.
Absolutely.
So the dialogue, it becomes this back and forth, almost like a Socratic questioning,
Mhm.
Is owning people as property intrinsically immoral? Yes or no? Did God command it or permit it?
Hmm.
And pushing further, is there any situation where God could allow something fundamentally unethical?
And this really flags that question of doctrinal consistency, doesn't it? Justin keeps talking about context, about gradual revelation, trying to draw this line between, say, temporary Old Testament rules and the eternal moral law found in Christ.
But there's a tension there.
There is. As the source points out, there's an apparent contradiction. If God cannot permit intrinsic immorality, and if we now see slavery as intrinsically immoral, how could God have permitted it at all, even temporarily?
Right. That's the logical knot. That's the tightrope the AI has to walk.
So Justin attempts to navigate this. It tries drawing a distinction, a very careful one. It argues that some acts, like homosexual acts, are intrinsically disordered and always immoral according to its programming based on Catholic teaching.
Okay.
But then it positions social institutions like slavery differently, saying they were tolerated historically but not actively endorsed as good. A subtle difference, maybe?
Tolerated but not endorsed. It's a fine line.
It is. But here's the real turning point, I think. The user insists. They demand a yes or no answer.
The direct confrontation.
Exactly. And through this persistent questioning, pressing the logic, Justin is finally forced to state it explicitly. According to the Catholic teaching it represents, slavery is not intrinsically immoral,
Wow.
but in the same breath, homosexual acts are intrinsically immoral.
And that just lays it bare, doesn't it? It really highlights this significant logical fork in the road within the AI's responses, and it reflects the underlying theology being presented.
Cool.
Well, you have God presented as absolutely forbidding certain things, homosexuality, polytheism, no exceptions, no historical wiggle room allowed in the AI's view.
Right.
But then other things, like slavery, which are widely condemned today, are presented as having been only sort of regulated temporarily in the past. They fall into different moral categories within that framework.
It's a very specific way of categorizing moral actions.
It is very specific theological categories at play.
Okay, so after wrestling with the Old Testament and slavery, the conversation shifts. It moves to the New Testament. What did Justin do with Paul's words in Galatians 3:28? There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. That sounds like a pretty radical statement against distinctions.
It certainly sounds that way, and Justin makes another distinction here. It argues Paul is talking about spiritual equality, meaning it abolishes distinctions in terms of dignity, access to salvation. We're all equal in Christ spiritually. But Justin argues it doesn't erase ongoing social realities or biological ones, like male and female. Ah, okay. So, equal in spirit, but distinctions remain in the world.
That's the interpretation given. But what's really fascinating, and the human questioner points this out sharply,
Yes.
is that within the very same sentence from Paul, the AI interprets slave nor free as abolishing slavery socially, or at least spiritually undermining it to the point of abolition.
Okay.
Yet it interprets male nor female as preserving gender distinctions biologically and socially.
Huh. So, in one phrase, two different interpretive approaches.
Exactly. It really raises questions about the method of interpretation. How do you decide which part of a text like that is transformative, overturning old norms, and which part is just describing social realities that continue?
Yeah, that's not obvious at all. It seems quite selective.
It highlights the interpretive choices being made.
So, let's step back. What does all this mean? For you listening to this, what are the takeaways? The article sums up what the human user learned from this whole exchange with the AI.
And basically, according to Justin, and by extension, the Catholic answer's position it represents slavery, historically, is not considered intrinsically immoral, even though it's condemned now.
A crucial point.
Meanwhile, other acts, like homosexual acts, are deemed intrinsically immoral, absolutely, with no historical exceptions allowed in this view. That's a really stark contrast.
It is. And this deep dive, I think it really underscores several critical things for you, the listener, whether you're dealing with religious texts yourself or just interested in AI and ethics.
Like what?
Well, first you see progressive revelation in action. It's a key interpretive tool used here to handle ancient texts that seem morally problematic today.
Okay.
Second, it throws that Catholic distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic evil into sharp relief. You see how it's applied, what work it does theologically.
Read the categorization we talked about.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, just vividly shows the sheer complexity, the ambiguities involved in interpreting ancient scriptures, especially when those texts seem to endorse practices we now find abhorrent.
It's not straightforward.
Not at all. And this dialogue, it also serves as this fascinating real-world stress test for an AI. Can it handle these nuanced, deeply uncomfortable questions with clarity, with logical rigor, within a specific religious framework?
And what's the verdict?
Well, it shows the challenges. It really lays bare the difficulties any theology, especially one relying on ancient texts, faces when trying to answer modern moral questions, particularly when someone rigorously presses for logical consistency right through history.
Yeah, this conversation with an AI, it really does make you think, doesn't it, about how we read texts, how beliefs in societies change, and how we navigate these really tough moral questions over time.
It absolutely does. And it maybe leaves you with a question to ponder. If a moral rule is presented as a divine command, a prohibition from God, what does that imply about its consistency, its application across totally different times and cultures?
That is a powerful thought to sit with. And just as a final note, if you find yourself really disagreeing with the AI's conclusions here or wanting more detail, the author of the original piece suggests contacting Catholic Answers directly, for their own clarification on how they present these doctrines.